Hello, everyone. It's Mr. Yamas here, one of the world history teachers at Johnson High School. Welcome to our first online really lecture here. And we're basically going to start where we left off, guys, after the 9 weeks. I know we did midterms and all that stuff, but we're going to start with pre Columbian civilizations. And so we're going to be covering civilizations like the Aztecs, Mayas, and the Inca Empire here, but they're called pre-Columbian because they were there before Christopher Columbus arrived already. And there were many more in North America and in South America, but we're going to cover only these three really quick. And so, one of the first things, guys, that we have to understand immediately is how did these people get to North America? Because for the past times, we've been covering everything's in Europe, right? Everything's in Africa, everything's in China, everything's everywhere on that side of the world. But what's happening on our side here in North America on this side? Who was there before us and stuff like that? So way in the beginning, and you saw one of the videos here, is that there was an ice age on the north, basically all the North Pole area. And so what would happen was that people from China and Asia would start to travel. Asian hunters crossed the land bridge through this land bridge made of ice and would come all the way down here. As you can see, these red arrows coming down this way. So they would come all the way down here and they would start to settle. Eventually, what happened, and here's another picture for you guys. Eventually, what happened is that all this ice melt, all this ice sheet started to melt. And so when these people tried going back, well, they couldn't because they were met by water. And so they had to come back all the way down to South America, to Monteverde, all the way down over here, guys. So that's how the first Americans started to come on this part of the world. So from here, you're going to start to have, for example, your Mississippian culture on this side. You're going to have your Aztecs, your Mayas, and your Incas start developing on this side. So this happened many years ago while everything was happening in Europe and China and Africa, everything that we covered so far. All of that was happening. This was happening on this side, settling down. So one of the first cultures that we started to see here really quick were what we call the Olmecs and the Toltecs, the Olmeca or the Tolteca people. And so the Olmecs is basically translated into the people of rubber, or the rubber people. And basically their main resource was rubber. They considered to have been the first around southern Gulf Coast of Mexico or Mexico. And so basically these people are going to be like one of the very first ones that are going to be become your Mayans. Your Tolteca or your Toltecs, in other words, artisan people, they're going to continue everything that the Olmecs did, all this art and all these practices, but they're going to be the descendants of what we call the Azteca or the Mexica people. And so these are what we call the mother cultures here first. So these were some of the very first cultures that developed when these people came from China and all these areas and Africa and so on to settle down this part of the world. And so we have the Mayan people, which they're located in present day Guatemala. They all have one city. It's like a little mayor. They all have a little ruler who they believe that they come from a god, whichever god that it is. And so it unites several cities under one king. So yes, the Mayans are going to have one big king in charge of all the cities, but each city is going to have their own little small king. Most Mayan workers or people were peasant farmers. So they lived in little huts and grew corn, or small craftsmen that made like little jewelry or tables and chairs and stuff like that for the people that were rich there. But in order for you to survive and to keep living in the Mayan controlled area, you had to pay taxes in form of crops. So if you were a corn farmer, you would pay a tax and you would give corn. If you were, I don't know, whatever other farmer that you were, then you would pay taxes and that stuff. They're really known for the rubber, which is the Olmeca people here, the rubber people, because they're going to create a game. And we'll see a clip right now. I'll show you all a clip of a game. It's called a Pok. And so they basically play that game, and I'll explain what happens after. The calendar, obviously, the Mayan calendar is very famous, but it was actually to predict the accuracy of when people were going to attack them and when they needed to have a certain religious ceremony. and how to honor the gods like the sun, rain, and the corn, because their calendar helped them. For example, they would say, "Oh, the calendar is coming up. Every 30 days, we have to start making a sacrifice for the god of the rain because it needs to rain right now." Stuff like that. So they would have the calendar for accuracy and other stuff for religious ceremonies as well. And let me just show you real quick the Mayan game. There is no audio, unfortunately, guys, for this. I can hear it, but you can't because this thing doesn't allow to play audio. But let's just look at the game here real quick. This is called Pok, or the Mayan ball game. And so what these Mayans are doing at this point, you can see they're hitting it with their hip. They cannot use their upper body, but they can use their lower body. So part of the thigh or the legs or the hip, they can use this. And so the object of the game, as you can see there, is they're trying to put it into that court right there, into that entry or that hole right there. And so they're trying to put it there, and it takes them a while actually. And it's really, it was really harder back in the day because they didn't have this platform right here, like this little slanted platform to go up. It used to be that it was just a flat surface, and from the flat surface you had to really hit your hip all the way up there so the ball can get there. And it's a really interesting game. And so there you go, he did it. So basically, people would spectate and they would look at this and they would play the game until whatever time they wanted to start, until the sun would come down. Okay, until the sun would come down. And basically what would happen to those people, whoever lost the game, they had to be sacrificed to a god. And so that was basically the game. So you weren't just playing the game because, oh, let me have fun. You were playing the game because someone needed to be sacrificed. And so I'm just going to show you real quick here some of the most important buildings there of the Mayans, like the Chichen Itza, the calendar, and the sacrifices that they would do here, guys. It was used for a lot of religious ceremonies and sacrifices, as well. And so now let's go to our potential ancestors, the Aztec people or the Mexica people. They were, they started in Tenochtitlan, or present-day Mexico City, El DF, the middle of a swampy lake. They depended mostly on something called chinampas, and they had a religious leader. Okay, so that means that they would always believe that someone needed to be sacrificed for the purposes of worshiping the gods, and they were always fighting against the people, and they would always conquer people there. They would always wanted to make sure that whoever they conquered, then that's the person that's going to be a slave. And here's one of the most interesting myths that you may recognize today. So there's a god the Aztecs believe in, a god. It's called Huitzilopochtli. And he asked the people of Tenochtitlan to look for an eagle devouring a snake. And so that already raises a lot of like, oh, an eagle eating a snake. And so I don't know if this sounds familiar to you all, but you had to find an eagle eating the snake. And so, yes, that's going to be the modern basis of the Mexican flag today. So that's why Mexico has that flag, because the original settlers of Mexico were these Aztecs, the Aztecas. Okay, so that's why they started to do that. Here's a couple of pictures of the Aztec people here. So this is called the Great Temple, and I'll show you all a video right now what it is they did in this temple, and it can be a little graphic, but it's one of the videos that I like to show my students because it's interesting to see it. These are the Chinampas, guys, because their city, and you can see this picture right here, their city was in the middle of a lake. So they're like, how do we grow food if the lands are over here? And sometimes you probably can't grow food in these mountains or on the sides of the mountains. So what they started doing were these. They basically started getting dirt and then putting it all together until it became really hard, and then they became the floating gardens. So here they would have the upper soil, and then in the bottom the water would start, like, the plants here and the crops would start sucking in the water from the bottom, and they were called floating gardens. So these are called chinampas. So that's how these Aztec peoples survived here. Any crops, tomatoes, anything that they would do. So this is called the floating gardens. Again, a piece of soil, and then in the bottom is the water, and then the crops would always be drinking the water from the bottom. And the last civilization that we're going to cover here is the Inca civilization, which is now in present-day Peru. They're in South America. The people there lived a little bit better than the Aztecs or the Mayans because uh, they had a little bit more jobs and they had a little bit more stuff to do there. For example, it's something called the mita system. So, and you didn't have to pay taxes, but you did have to construct like roads and buildings for the people. Their farming was cutting mountains and making the terracing system, but they were mostly going to be known for their roads and bridges all over the empire. So they also believed in supernatural power of the elements. So, for example, they believed there were gods out there, and the god of wind or the god of rain, and they would create and destroy all these things. So the gods controlled everything. And so, how do they predict the will of the gods? And it's going to be interesting here. Some of the priests there would start chewing or would start watching coca leaves. So yes, your cocaine leaves. They would watch or chew that, and then they would get all high, literally, or they would get all mensos, how you all say, and then they would start predicting stuff, and also spider movement for the predictions as well. So this is the Machu Picchu right here, the terracing forming occur in Inca, Peruvian, and so on. Now, I have a couple of minutes left here, so let me show you all this other last video of the sacrifices. Mighty Kukulkan, which is a god for them, okay, whose fury could scorch this earth to oblivion. Remember, they believed in all these gods. They said, other sacrifice, let us appease you with this sacrifice, to exalt you in your glory, to make our people prosper. We're going to sacrifice this person to prepare for your return. Warrior unafraid and willing. I mean, obviously he's afraid. And then they would literally just, people had to see it from age to age. And then there you go. There's a stab. Thanks be to you. They would sacrifice, take the heart out. Taking out the heart. There you go. So there's a heart. He took out the heart and he's going to give it to the higher priestess there. And look at all these people. These are the Aztecs right here. The Aztec people, they're all like, yeah, let's go, let's do it, you know. Some of these gods would end up like frying it or drinking the blood, and some of these priests and frying it. And then this guy right here, he's spazzing out. He's predicting the will of the gods. Then they would chop off the head of the person, chopping off the head, and then the body would basically be there. Throw the head down. The body's no use anymore. So then it would be these catchers in the bottoms who would end up catching it. Okay, these are the Aztecs. And then they would also end up throwing the body down. And I know it's a little graphic, and I know it's a little bit much. But again, they're doing it. This was their religious belief. They believed in this. They believed that they had to do this stuff because uh, they needed something to happen. They needed something interesting to happen for them as well. So here's a thing, guys. So we're gonna be doing these PowerPoints like these from now on until if we go back. So for right now, just use these PowerPoints to answer the other questions and essays and questions that we'll be posting on the Google Classroom. If you have any questions, just go ahead and email or send a message to your teacher, and then your teacher will answer any questions, anything else you want to know and stuff like that. So in the meantime, these were pre-Columbian civilizations. We'll see you next time or on the other side of the screen until the next lesson.